This video contains spoilers. Persona 5 is a fascinating experience. I don't love this game as much as other people, but I like thinking about it because of how volatile of an experience it can be. When it hits, it's right in the feels, and when it misses, it's a foul ball that knocks you into a 30-year coma, like an owl getting taken advantage of by a horse. Is this reference not clear enough yet? And I feel like the most volatile experience for me is the cast of characters. There are some I like, some I don't like, and some I don't really care about because they aren't fleshed out as much as I would have liked them to be. But I can't be too harsh on the game for it. With the number of characters that Persona 5 tries to flesh out, you're bound to make a few mistakes here and there, and the game never asks you to get super invested in every character, so the worst case scenario is usually a moderately below average character. Besides, the main focus should be on the main party members, and most of them are good. Yusuke is still best boy, and he is still asexual, and you are gonna be okay with it! I also love Ryuji and Akechi almost as much. And although he's not playable, Sojiro is so charming and riveting that he might as well be one of the main characters in my book. Unfortunately, I don't care for the rest of the party, but that's just because of personal taste. I don't like Anne, Futaba, or Makoto at all, though I will admit they're well-written characters. Joker isn't the most interesting protagonist, but he does have competent characterization and good development. Haru got robbed of a character arc, and I do think that it holds the game back quite a lot. However, as far as the character itself, she's still pretty likable and would have easily been one of my favorites if she got the attention that she deserved. And I could say similar things about Kasumire. Don't ask me why I'm calling her that. Unfortunately, there is just one character that isn't likable or well written. And that's Cassandra Lee Morris Cat. I'm not sure how hot of a take this is, but Morgana is one of the worst video game characters ever made. He's annoying, he's worthless, he's detrimental to the Phantom Thieves, and he's a stupid character overall. I don't usually get visibly annoyed by fictional characters, especially if they're barely in the story and the worst that they can do is bore me. But Morgana manages to do everything he can to get under my skin and grin like the worm he is. Yet despite all of this, he's often portrayed as the mascot of Persona 5 aside from Joker himself. You would think that a character like this would receive tons of care put into him by the developers and the writers. Unfortunately, his character is just wasted potential. While I think that some players would agree with me on this, at the same time I feel like there would be some people that love Morgana. Whether it be because of his design or because he's funny. It's perfectly okay to like this character. Daily reminder that I'm not here to tell you how to think, and if there are any YouTubers who are, then by all means, stop watching their mediocre content. Unrelated picture. Donkey is a married man with over 3 million subs, so by default, his entire existence is objectively better than mine. But for a character put in the spotlight so often throughout the game, it feels like this character was only made to market Persona 5 and not much else. It's almost as if Morgana's saturation throughout the game is similar to how Atlus keeps shilling Persona 5. I mean, other video game developers do the exact same thing with their own games? Nevertheless, in a cinnamon twist served next to a steaming hot pot of irony, the main reason why Morgana is one of the worst JRPG characters of all time is that he is emblematic of every single one of Persona 5's writing flaws rolled into one scatty cat. I think that most people who played Persona 5 found Morgana at least somewhat annoying at first. Lots of players have memed about Morgana s***ing to Anne, heckling Ryuji all the time, but those aren't even the worst parts about his personality. I'd argue that he also likes to suck on Joker's pickle and peaches multiple times a day. It's fine in the beginning because 1. Joker rescued Morgana in Kamoshida's palace, and 2. It's beneficial for Joker's character because with all of the other students gossiping about his criminal record, having a supportive friend that's always by his side is helpful for his mental state. But later on, Shujin Academy learns to warm up to Joker as a person, so there's no real reason for Morgana to continue kissing up to Joker so much. They can still be close friends, and Morgana can even look up to Joker in a way, but this type of special connection should at least be mutual between the two. But despite Morgana being a vital confidant, it doesn't feel like it's mutual. I'm not sure if it's because Joker barely talks or because he doesn't care about Morgana all that much, but I know that Joker tries to act supportive to his other fellow Phantom Thieves during their confidants, even if he's not very good with words. Not to mention that Morgana doesn't have any sort of special interactions with the other party members. I guess I can understand Makoto and Futaba, but why does he have no banter with Yusuke or Haru? I feel like Yusuke would be enthralled by Morgana's peculiar design. Maybe Yusuke could see traces of humanity in Morgana based on its design and personality. And after hearing all those rat puns in Shido's palace, I feel like Yusuke would be a huge fan of animals. There might be some occasional dialogue in Mementos that I may have missed, but even if that was the case, there isn't nearly enough of it, and I feel like it would make for some genuinely funny character moments. As for Haru, bantering back and forth with each other would give them a riveting friendship. Seeing him interact with Haru as an actual person would have been compelling given how he originally used her as a tool to spite the rest of the Phantom Thieves. Unfortunately, we don't get that because we clearly need to see Morgana call Ryuji a
blonde monkey!
Sonic Hog Steve from the future?
These lack of character interactions with the rest of the party make Morgana's previously established interactions with Ann and Ryuji come across as wooden and forced. And Morgana being the supposed mentor to Joker is made even worse because he feels less like an elder friend to Joker and more like a generic tutorial character with a cute face. Oh hey, speaking of which, in the past, I have briefly mentioned that one of Persona 5's biggest problems is its lack of subtlety, and now I can dive deeper into examples of that because Morgana is a major factor of that issue. Morgana is the physical embodiment of all those "I'm here too" lines, which is where a character states a throwaway line to remind the player that other characters are in the party too. In Morgana's case, there are moments in this game where he has nothing useful to say. He always feels the need to speak up and explain a lot of things to the player, to Joker. At one point, he's talking about the main theme of a palace, thereby removing any sense of immersion and taking the player out of the story. At another point, he's restating what the other Phantom Thieves have already been talking about in the group chat, because it's not like the player could just scroll up if they missed anything from the conversation. Like, this is an M-rated game. I think that the player can guess what's going on. Also, Ryuji, you're allowed to say I get that he's the tutorial character, but that doesn't mean he has to keep talking. The only funny thing about this is that it somewhat relates to his role in combat. Morgana is incredibly weak in battle. If you're not using Morgana as the main healer of your party, then you don't have him in the party at all. I would be saying this anyway because I've always felt that healers in most JRPGs are not worth having in the party when healing items exist. But yeah, there's not much I can add to this. His attack isn't that good outside of critical attacks, and his defense is also pitiful. Not helped by the fact that, outside of the airsoft shop, it's pretty hard to find a lot of strong armors for Morgana. His only real use to me is as a healing battery, which, even then, I still have other options. Some might say this was intentional because of Morgana's character arc, and believe me, I'll definitely dissect that character arc in a little bit. But just because you're trying to have a message in your video game doesn't mean you should sacrifice good gameplay for it. Is this not why people hate Jasper Bat Jr. so much? Lest we forget that Morgana is one of the first characters you can recruit in your party, so having a character be this weak in combat would be even worse than it has any right or reason to be. Royal does alleviate this issue by having Baton Pass unlocked from the start, but Morgana is still gonna die within a few strong hits, especially during boss fights that don't have weaknesses. To be fair, I am going off of the assumption that the player would replace Morgana the moment they could, but it depends on the player. Other people may have gotten used to his low defense and kept him on the party anyway. I feel like giving the player the option to replace Morgana at the beginning of the game would have helped this narrative a lot better. And this character arc seems to be the one thing that makes all of Morgana's quirks come together. And I will admit that this is exactly why I hate Morgana so much. Morgana's development is about how he feels useless within the Phantom Thieves. It sort of begins with the fact that he doesn't like it when you call him a cat, and that's because he is convinced that he's a human. Morgana is also revealed to have amnesia, having no memory as to who he is because that's never been done before. Still, he desires to prove that he's a human. This is portrayed with the occasional nightmare that he has where his shadow form is just his cat form. Although I'm not sure if this is a shadow form as much as his fears that he might just be nothing more than a cat. It would have been cool if we got to fight Morgana's shadow form and helped Morgana accept the fact that he's just a cat, but this nightmare isn't the main focus of his character arc as much as it's something to push his fears, so fair enough. Instead, the main focus of his character development is how he starts to feel useless once Makoto and Futaba join the party. This causes him to leave the Phantom Thieves in what would proceed to be the most infamous story moment in the entire game. I can understand feeling useless in a group of people, and having this type of development be portrayed by a magical talking cat that aspires to be human is honestly brilliant. But it falls flat in both the execution and its lack of a proper resolution. Morgana's feelings are built up decently, but the way that he gets upset with the Phantom Thieves feels so rushed. I feel like his sensitivity should take more than just one snide comment from Ryuji to be revealed, especially since Morgana has been constantly teasing and insulting Ryuji for a majority of the game at this point. If Ryuji was the one that kept teasing Morgana throughout the game, or if Ryuji started getting too physical with Morgana at a good number of points, or maybe if Futaba started teasing Morgana a bit since she lacks basic social skills like most people in the YouTube comment section, I'd assume, Morgana's insecurities would be more reasonable. But getting upset to the point of ditching the Phantom Thieves and going off on his own over what seems to be one comment makes him come across as so bitch-made. And I thought that he was a male, not a female. It doesn't justify leaving his friends as much as it should. I know that this is the point of his ego, and hey, a character that is flawed in this demeanor could be interesting to develop. But instead, it comes across as an elementary school bully running away from his home because the kid he constantly bullied stood up to him one time. But whatever. Cheap setup aside, it can still be a satisfying character arc because it's resolved by the end, right? Sadly, it isn't. What we get instead is Morgana stealing the spotlight from Haru in her father's palace, realizing that his power comes from his friends. Oi! What the f? This game had Ryuji getting back at the man who screwed him over during his days on the track team, and in Yusuke rising against their abusers, and Futaba ruining the false image of her mother despising her. Meanwhile, Haru gets nothing because Morgana gives a big, fat speech about how there's no replacing these guys. Look, it's good that Morgana gets to prove his worth to himself, and speaking up for Haru is admirable as well. But the problem is that he still acted completely irrationally in the beginning, and there's still the question of why the true fight against Haru's father focuses on Morgana instead of Haru. Hell, President Okumura even just randomly points in his direction for no f***ing reason. Like, why? I feel like there could have been a moment where Haru tells her father that she would prefer reworking the entirety of Okumura Foods or even shutting it down. Or at the very least, it would be cooler than understanding the power of friendship in a game where friendship is already one of the core themes of the game. This is why I say that Haru was robbed of a character arc because, I mean, she was. The heiress of a massive food corporation being forced into a higher power after the death of her father, the CEO, and now she has to deal with the burden of what to do with the company next. She doesn't have to let all this new power forced upon her, and I'm sure that President Okumura had an interim CEO that wasn't his daughter, but you cannot pretend that there'd be no weight on Haru's shoulders. Yet for some reason, the game wants you to believe that. Though, to be fair, Morgana does learn that he's using Haru in the same way that her father has done in his brief monologue. But I don't think that this is the lesson that he needed to learn the most. Not to mention that he never had a conversation with Ryuji about their little scuffle from before heisting the palace. Or at least one where Ryuji gives a proper apology, and Morgana forgives him and apologizes for his rude comments as well. I would have loved to see these characters become better friends and even continue their facetious bickering. But most importantly, he still doesn't exactly prove to himself how he isn't useless to the Phantom Thieves. And don't justify this by telling me that his development happened in a one-off comment or something that doesn't take place during the game's main plot, as that is not how anything works. I don't think that a Morgana Palace would be necessary to flesh out his development, as I think that you could get the same result with a mere trip to Mementos during Morgana's Confidant, kinda like what they did with Mishima. Though this would require his confidant to be optional instead of automatic, but I doubt that it'd be that much of a hassle. Akechi's confidant went from automatic in the base game to optional in Royal. I would prefer this to what Persona 5 ended up doing, and more importantly, what Persona 5 Royal didn't do. Given the third semester's commentary on living one's ideal life and its messages on how it's better to live with the pain you've come across, one would think that they'd revisit Morgana's wish to be a human and give him a proper resolution to his character arc and have him realize that he doesn't have to be human to be happy. But they don't do this. There's no exploration as to what life would be like if Morgana was a human, nor is there any elaboration on why he wants to be human aside from wanting to be a proper lover for Anne, I guess. This is an overall problem with the third semester since we don't even get to sample what life would be like within Maruki's reality, and the game just kind of assumes that we'd want to disagree with Maruki even though he brings up some good questions like why do we need to suffer in life, as well as challenge the common philosophy of my flaws make me who I am. I could go into detail on why this is a problem, but we're trying to focus on Morgana's wasted development. Why does Morgana resent the idea of being a cat so much? We know that he wants to be human, but given how much he's helped the team in his cat form, is staying in his cat form that big of an issue for him? Any possible character development about this seems to have been all off screen, so giving the player some insight would be required. And don't tell me that Morgana is acting this way because of how secretive he is. He's reached a point where he becomes intimate with the other party members. For all this talk he has about how the Phantom Thieves are where he belongs, why doesn't he prove it? And this is why this character is so hard for me to like. Morgana's not enough to ruin the game for me, but he does represent all of the writing flaws that are within this game. A lot of people just write off Morgana as an annoying simp, but to me, he's much worse than that. He's the most apparent case of this game's lack of subtlety. He hogs the spotlight from characters that need it way more, and most importantly, he's wasted potential. He even represents moments where the game chooses to prioritize quirky character interactions above fleshing out characters in certain situations. Don't get me wrong, this game still has plenty of those deep conversations that make the characters feel real, and to me, moments like this are when the game is at its best. But sometimes it feels like the game isn't interested in letting the characters have these conversations. Since Morgana is essentially the mascot of Persona 5, it's fitting why he brings the game so far down for me. I'm cool with side characters not being very strong or well written, and I'm even okay with subpar antagonists. But for a character that is supposed to be the face of the game in some way, who really should have had some of the most attention to fleshing him out, it seems like all of that attention was given to him for the sake of it and nothing else. If you still like Morgana as a character even after this video, fair enough. I still don't want to tell you how to think, but it sucks when the most useless character stays useless throughout the entire game.